you want 30 days filled with kettlebell workouts for free? Check the first link in the description. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Kettle Nights podcast. I have with me my main man, Jarrod Cardona, aka the Crazy Trainer. You might know him from Instagram. That's where he's hailing from. I consider Jarrod a unconventional practitioner with kettlebells and the way he does it. And there is this new type of idea that is growing in the kettlebell world as far as I see it, and that is this idea of flows. But he's also a juggernaut when it comes to juggling. So make no mistake, he's a heavyweight, and I'm blessed to have him on a podcast right now. So Jarrod, welcome to the podcast.
So happy to nerd out with you about stuff we love. Let's go.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Let's nerd out. I like this, man. Let's nerd it out. So, Jarrod, we always do the same thing when we get started with people that we have on a podcast, and that's just give us your story. Kettlebells, training, how did you get started? Let us know.
Cool. Again, super happy to be on the podcast. For anyone who's tuning in, participating by listening, we appreciate you, and I'm grateful to share with great people. So, my story, I would say I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, South Florida. I was pretty athletic my whole life. You know, I was a natural athlete. I was great at basketball. I played some football, soccer. So hand-eye coordination for me was always something that was practiced. I got used to dropping the ball early, showed up to practice, and eventually got really great at catching. So hand-eye coordination and play are really a background of who I am as an athlete and as a coach in teamwork. Going into my senior year of high school, I kind of dropped off basketball. I started smoking a lot more weed at the time, drinking, turned my attention to girls, and I just really didn't prioritize basketball anymore. And so that was what kept me healthy. That's what kept me very active, and offset my Oreo input, which I would consume a lot of Oreos in a sitting. So that eventually led
Oreos.
Oreos, yep.
Okay. Keep going.
So I was addicted to Oreos. So I would eat those a lot, and I stopped playing basketball. And so from 18 to 20, I put on a lot of weight. I probably went to about 230 pounds, something like that. And I'm a 5'7" guy. I'm not the tallest person in the room. So that was, for me, overweight. I felt slow. I felt sluggish. And going into my junior year of college, I had just taken a health and wellness class that summer. And I was like, man, I don't really know what I like. I don't really know what I want to do, but I like sports, and to understand the mechanics of what my body's doing in that health and wellness course made me more interested in at least pursuing something with physiology, something with exercise, something with health and wellness, going into that industry. So my junior year, I decided to enter my major in Orlando, Florida. I decided to move to another city, made a big jump, at least for my family, and dove into kinesiology. So that was my major I dove into in college. And with that, I eventually started to understand a bit more about the nutrition, how that works, and how to lose body fat. I started in the college gym in college setting, which is, hey, you're now a bodybuilder like everybody else who starts fitness. You're a bodybuilder. That's where all my knowledge came from. In my degree, most of that came from a general NASM, the NASM Academy. So the information there was cool, but as you know, it didn't talk about kettlebells really, or unconventional training, or functional movement on another level, especially for what's come out the last few years. So that dove me into the health and wellness, my interest. Did my own transformation, and was immediately fascinated with the biology of it. I was like, holy moly, the physiology. I could see the veins in my arms. I could see new veins popping up, new nutrients going to new places. It's so applicable. And so I really fell in love with the science first. I didn't know about training. I didn't have really an interest in training, to be honest with you. I wanted to become a physical therapist. That was where I was going with that.
Yeah.
And then I took an internship, got to study physical therapy in that setting, saw outpatient, inpatient, rehabilitation work.
Yeah.
Some really cool stuff going on,
Yeah.
but just wasn't for me. I didn't believe in all of the practices. I always feel like there's more. And I felt limited when I was in that setting about what they were showing clients and people who really just wanted to feel better. And to me, I was like, why is it so complicated when I know about myofascial release
Why
and
is it
self-release?
why is it so complicated?
Outside of a leg extension, how about a hamstring curl? How about, external and internal knee rotation? Why aren't we talking about that in this kind of setting? So that drove me back to school on the path of like, I'm going to do physical therapy. I'm not as excited about it. And then I taught a group training in one of my internship courses at the University of Central Florida. Go Knights, by the way. And ended up just falling in love with the group setting. As soon as I had that many people show up to class, it was like 8 people. I was in flow state. I was so excited for them to be there. I was so excited for me to teach. I was in their faces. It was the first time I really got to truly cheerlead, truly coach both of them at the same time. And I was so rejuvenated from that 1 hour. I think I just turned 22 or about to turn 22. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I don't know how. I know most trainers don't, at least from what I'm seeing, don't kill it financially. Not like a physical therapist, but I am so high off life right now, off this social interaction, this connection, this exchange of energy, of physical passion happening in the room. Like I got to do it for the rest of my life. And so that hit me immediately going into my senior year. I graduated, ended up becoming a personal trainer at a corporate gym here in LA Fitness.
Right.
Got my first year and some change there. And I really went down my career in the last 6 years. It felt like things moved very quickly. I had a year and a half at LA Fitness, that corporate world. I had a bunch of, I was working 44 hours of personal training sessions.
Oh my God,
it was
man.
insane, right? The amount I didn't realize it.
And it's important for people to understand. It's if you think, right, that's what people from the outside who don't have this perspective and the experience, they think, well, come on, man, just being a personal trainer and running around with people showing how to do it, that's not hard to do. But for people who have the inside experience and a perspective, I remember when I started with my business and my gym, and I had 9 sessions per day, which was so, it's a passion that you're doing, but it is incredibly draining. It drains your energy because you're always pushing, motivating, focusing, correcting. And this requires so much energy that at the end of the day, you're completely burned out. So I totally feel where you're coming from, man. This is just for people to understand how taxing this job is, right?
Honestly, just when you give a shit, Greg, like,
yeah, most definitely
care about
most definitely.
In front of you.
That's an important
listening.
Oh, that's an important condition, man. That's an important condition. I had just had this conversation with Angie. We sat together and I was like, I would make a really bad corporate gym owner because I care about people actually showing up. And I sometimes get so mad at this that I care, because then I get mad when they don't show up. And then I have to tell myself to close my heart to it to a certain extent and understand that people have different priorities. But I was like, yeah, I couldn't make a good fitness corporate business suit. I couldn't, because I want people to show up. Man, that's a great distinction that you just threw out there. Most definitely, man.
100%. It's relatable to, I think, coaches who are actually passionate about this craft.
Oh,
there's a lot of people just kind of walking through coaching and not being as intentional about the experience of what's really going on, which is, hey, this human is vulnerable right now. They came to you for a feeling of security that you can help them unleash within themselves. Like, you got to be present. I refer to this as like, I don't want to get too, I can be explicit sometimes, but it's like a making love energy, man. There's like, we are dialed in every second. I'm with you. I'm not thinking about my past. I'm not thinking about my future. I'm thinking about this very moment. And so that's the energy exchange that, like yourself, you've experienced 9 sessions a day, that drains you, because it's just, you have to give back to yourself that much, or find the right teammates, community that's going to juice you up back consistently like that, which is tough, man. It's an anomaly. There's not many places that just juice you up with energy, the right networks necessarily, with the right interests that really just boost you. So I'm actually in that phase now.
And even, you know, what's interesting, Jarrod, even if you kind of get this rejuvenating feeling from whatever kind of source. I've been doing this now I'm entering my 7th year as a business owner and as a personal trainer, and doing this all by myself with Angie. And I'm realizing that you have to cut back on the hours that you do coaching. You increase the price, you go up, because, you know, if you're able to serve more value, you have to increase the price. That's what we do next year, by the way. And
yeah, it's getting out of the operator hat as the business owner, right? And going into
and still, you know, even if you, I mean, I wear many hats, but even as a coach, which I still love, and I think I'll also want to do it forever, is you have to take care of your energy levels, because it's just what you're saying. You give the person 100% the attention. You don't look away for a second. They always know that the eye of the coach is on them. And I see where you're coming from, man. You're coming from a place of empathy and love. And I think that's one of the most vital parts of being a trainer. You can be technically a little bit, let's say, like, worse off, but have a loving heart and be very empathetic. The other stuff you can still learn, but being an awesome and beautiful human being, and I love this, man. People are vulnerable. So if you meet them with empathy and love, they feel that you care. And I love this. In English, this works so well. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So when they realize this, they want to show up at your sessions, but at the same time, you always have to be careful with your energy levels. And I had to reduce it to a certain extent, where I'm reducing my hours, because it's just too taxing. And then the last client probably doesn't get the same amount of energy than the first client. So I had to find a way around it, and now it works. But I'm just digressing a little bit. So keep going, man.
No, this is like, I love talking to somebody else about this. I have a few hats I've played that are probably very similar to yours too in the last few years. So that first year and a half I did corporate, I actually got removed from the gym because they thought I was building my own fitness facility. They thought I was going to build my own, my own tribe. I didn't even have a website. I still barely have a website. I was telling them, I was like, I want to be here, guys. I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to do all the things. I just want to train. And so they actually removed me from the facility. Yeah. On paper, it said I quit, which is cool, I guess. All right. And I ended up going into a boutique gym the next day. I just walked in, was like, hey, what is this? How do trainers work here? Where are the people? There's no people in here. I'm used to 1,000 people in my face. Where, you know, the corporate world, where is everybody? And he starts talking about training at his facility. It's small. I was in a multi-millionaire facility, and then all of a sudden I'm in a, you know, a 6-figure, I'm sure, facility, but something compared to a big corporate gym. It was like, wow, the environment is so different. Are my clients even going to like me? You know, and then you start to realize, is your value as a coach, or is your value in the facility and in the equipment? So in that boutique facility, I really learned a lot about the business, about sales, about your energy levels, and being aware of your behavior, because one-on-one, as you know, in the right setting, can be so beautiful, so intimate, so
100%, man. 100%.
Where I came from, corporate world, where I was trying to do that, but
it's impossible. Man, I love where you're taking this conversation, because we have a lot of coaches tuning in to these podcasts, especially on Spotify. So you're saying so many good things. It's the energy that you bring, the quality and the value that you have as a trainer. It has to match the perfect soil. If you're not on good soil, the soil is going to take away your value. And that's just plain fact. I realized when I started my personal trainer journey, because I was initially, like you, was working in a gym. Then I quit, left the fitness the industry world. I always trained, but I left the world. Then I slid back in it by accident, kind of. And then I started working as a PT at a local gym right here. And I knew something inside me. I think God was telling me, boy, you make sure you have your own place as soon as possible. So after like 4 or 5 months, something beautiful happened. I got this facility that I have right now, and the change, the
looks
value,
beautiful, by the way.
Thank you, man.
Very
It's
clean.
yeah, and it's everything that is needed, right? It's minimalistic, and I love it. It's people know what it's like when they show up here. It's all I don't want to digress with the gym now, but the main focus, I realized, wow, I'm now able to serve a much better value. And what you just mentioned, I think this happened to me as well. If you are a passionate human being, if you're good at your craft, and if you are reeking of competence, I think this creates a kind of atmosphere around you where the wrong people think that you want to be the boss, or you want to play the boss, or like you mentioned, you want to build your own tribe. While in reality, you're just passionate about what you do, and you want to help folks, and people realize, oh, this dude actually cares, so they flock towards you. And man, the same thing happened with me. Same thing.
Yep.
Just being passionate.
Being a natural enhancer, right? Like, yeah, I get to attend the party. I don't need to be the party host. I just love like adding to the party's experience.
Amen.
Like at the end of the night, I like to know that I helped 15, 20 people meet and become friends. And maybe one of them goes to work out together. Awesome. I felt so good that I could middleman and bridge a gap of energy that I knew would work well together. So I naturally had a facilitator energy, still do on a plane as well. So that boutique gym, like I was there for about a year, taught me a lot about those interpersonal relationships. The client is not a client, they are a human, and understanding that, put a name out there, Brock. Brock didn't show up today. Oh shit, he has kids, and one of them got sick, and his wife couldn't pick them up, and so he had, and started to realize, like, man, just exactly what you said. Humans are humans. It could be anything going on. And so that environment, it got real quiet. It wasn't loud all the time anymore, like a corporate setting, and so I was really able to listen to the person in front of me, and in that sense, provide more value just by understanding them on another plane. So that boutique gym was big for me. And I actually picked up my first kettlebell there because I'd never really seen a kettlebell. And they didn't do anything with kettlebells. They did all old style conventional lifts with very questionable form. The couple of coaches that were there were, in my opinion, they didn't want to keep learning 30 years ago, but very good businessmen in that sense. But I saw a kettlebell and I'd seen a Turkish getup on video, and I didn't memorize it. But I was like, I know the first few pieces, let me play. And so I ended up experimenting one day because I had so much more time in that boutique gym. I wasn't servicing 12 hours, 10 hours anymore. I was servicing 3, 2. So I had to replenish my clientele. So in the meantime, I was like, I'm going to explore, I'm going to learn, I'm going to improve my value with knowledge. Tried a Turkish getup, and I was blown away by the time I got into the windmill position. I was like, holy crap, holy shit, my pec activated, my lat activated, my shoulder activated, my hips are getting more mobility right now, and I feel my glutes are on, and I'm moving in multiple ways and multiple planes. My neurons, like my neuromuscular connections, were so happy. I remember I was so high off that session. Just, oh my God, I can't believe I did that so many things at once. It used to be so hard just to flex my pec. That was so hard back in the day, just to squeeze my butt cheek. And here I am doing 10 things at the same time, all across my body, and keeping it smart. The confidence level, right, for me just flew through the roof, knowing where I am in space and time a bit more. So the Turkish getup was actually the first thing I tried at the time, like a 8-kilogram kettlebell, something very light, I'm sure.
And how long was that ago? How long was that?
That would have been probably 4 years ago.
4 years ago. All right. Yeah.
Maybe a little over 4 years ago, first time I touched it. And then I ended up diving into kettlebell juggling shortly after. I think like within 6 weeks, I started researching on Instagram, right? Kettlebells, kettlebell flows, like, and the clean swing squat, like that didn't look appealing for me because one of the first things I saw was Drew Miller. I don't know if you know Drew Miller. And I saw him doing juggling, and I saw him go under the legs. That move where you throw it like this, like you lift it, you throw it under. And I was like, holy moly, like I play basketball. I love basketball. This is the same thing going on.
Amen.
I saw him do it with the right music in the background. I was like, I got to get into that. I skipped over everything. Like I touched the Turkish getup, and then all of a sudden I'm flipping kettlebells.
Skipped over everything.
I had to flip it. I had to try.
Yes.
I spent hours in the beginning doing that, just feeling it out with an 8 kilogram. Where does it go when I push it this way? You know, when I catch it on this side, where does my body naturally go? Because I was big into functional movement already, like locomotion and pivoting and like just rotational power. So I was already into the science of it. So once I got a kettlebell and I caught it on this side and the force was pulling me down, I was like, okay, instead of me just going straight down, I can just pivot my feet and I'll move with the force production of the kettlebell. If I catch it in the air, I need to absorb it. So I'm either going to fight it or I'm going to, move with it. So I started to learn more about those mechanics. And then I ended up opening up my own gym about 6 months later. I opened up a small 1,300 square foot facility. I had a business partner at the time. His father made a small investment. 3 months later, went to crap, wrong person to do business with, was not in it at all. I was doing I was doing 99.9% of the work in labor. Sadly, things were very eerie. He entered a whole different career and it just ended in burned bridges. And within 3 months of opening up that gym, I had no business partner. He took all the money that was in the savings, which it took me about 6 months to save $10K. And then I also lived with the guy. So overnight, I was homeless because I got kicked out. He put all my stuff out of the house. I had no money and I had no business partner and no understanding of business. And I'm a scared 26-year-old, I think at the time, 27-year-old. So I opened up the training spot at the time. And to avoid, honestly, diving and spiraling into like darkness and anger, I would go to the gym, a 24-hour fitness over here, which was 24-hour fitness. I didn't have to worry about the time. And they had showers and things that I needed at the time to get by.
Yes.
To be real, because I didn't have a home.
I'm signing up. Hey, what's the reason why you're signing up for, bro? I need to shower, my man.
I need that shower.
I haven't showered in weeks. What? My God, man. Wow.
So that's when I'll be honest with you, that's when I dove into the kettlebell. That is when I, like with the juggling, I went from doing maybe an hour of practice to all of a sudden 4, 3, 6, or I would go do 3 sessions, come back to 24-hour fitness, do some juggling for an hour, shower, go back to sessions. Because I don't have a shower at the facility at the time. And I didn't want people, I wasn't ready to be that vulnerable with a lot of the people I was working with. To be like, hey, I don't have a home. And, it felt, I'm a leader, right? I'm a leader. I'm scared to tell you I'm not well.
Wow.
So that got me in my juggle flipping world, whatever we call it, flipping, juggling, like that upgraded 50% of my time to that craft. And I realized at the time, like, man, I am not thinking about how angry I was at the guy. Like, I'm not thinking about how am I going to pay for this lease for the next 3 years? I'm thinking about, oh my God, this bell is right in front of me. And if I drop it, ow, I could hurt. I'm not even thinking that. I'm thinking about just the play, throwing it in the air, watching it, being with it. And so I got caught in what's called, I guess, a flow state is what people say, where I would just do something for hours and hours and hours because it brought me presence.
Wow. And man, I think it's, how do we say it? In the face of adversity, right? You have 2 options, man. Either go die or go flourish, right? You have no options, man. Man, I that resonates with me. I've had similar experiences, and one that was not homeless in that regard, but when I opened up the gym and bought my first equipment, I was facing a huge lawsuit. And the next thing was the pandemic, right? So the pandemic flipped everything upside down. And that's when I took a deep dive into kettlebells. And isn't it funny how bad things can lead certain people into a discovery journey, right? Where it's like, okay, you know what, man? Something that guides us inside of us is like, okay, let me just focus on this thing. And if it wasn't for adversity, who knows where we would be? So it's, man, that's It's deep stuff, man. And
we dive into what brings us life, right? What brings us to life. And the kettlebell with juggling. Again, I didn't even get into like proper technique, swinging, cleans, jerks, snatches until the last probably 2.5 years. But the first like year of the kettlebell, I knew functional movement with weight, how to leverage the weight and where my body would follow. And I fell in love with the flipping. And so how can I combine this into maybe something else?
Awesome. So let's just put an anchor point right there. So the juggling, the flipping, that was something that fascinated you, right? And yes. you saw the kettlebell for the first time in that boutique gym. And you did some research, but how focused was your research? Was it like, okay, I'm gonna have to see who's who in the world and then do what they do? Or did you just gravitate towards, what was his name again?
Drew Miller.
Did you just gravitate towards him like, okay, hey, well, that's what I got to do? Or did you do just some expanding type of research on like, okay, I got to see what is what and how is how and who is who?
Yeah, I would say Drew Miller was kind of the one person I think I nerded out for like 15 minutes on his page. And I think most of us who learn through Instagram and videos are very visual. So just watching the technique of not just the glutes, the core, like how does his wrist flick? What part of the finger is releasing what? Which hand is catching? Is he switching? So once I saw a few basic movements, like I saw him do a windmill, and I was like, okay, well, I can figure that out. Over time, my body will eventually like adapt to this pattern. So I would say learning just from him some things in the beginning. I just started watching Kettlebell Kings a little bit more. So I just started to get influenced through that. I didn't know the kettlebell world at all. And then I started to experiment a lot. I don't know, I'm going to show you, I guess, on a video. I'm going to use my baby bell. But, I would like, let's say, flip it like forward with forward intention, right? You'd have that first flip. And then because I had played with other like cables, cable rows and stuff. I used to play with cables where I'd pull it, then I'd pivot, and I'd like apply the pressure.
All right.
And I was really big into functional movement with cables.
All right.
And so I was like, oh, like if I catch the bell here, well, technically my body will pivot in the direction of where the weight is being distributed. If I relax, if I chill my grip, if I let my body follow the pattern. So I went into a lot of, I guess, exploration with the knowledge I knew about functional training and the pieces I was starting to get from Drew and from Kettlebell Kings.
Wow. And just for people who are on the audio podcast only, he just showed something on the video. So make sure you watch the video as well. Man, it's, the way you describe it, it sounds like you're really onto something interesting and expanding area of the kettlebell world that hasn't been done yet to a certain extent. I mean, of course, we know juggling, we know the Russian style juggling. We all know, of course, daring and all these heavyweights who, Beto, for example, all these juggernauts. But it's interesting. You're actually, and I like that. I just recently saw a video where you were doing what I told Daring that he should do as well. But maybe he does it differently. But I love how you did it in that video. You explained the flick of the wrist and how you place your thumb in the flip. So that's exactly breaking it down to a level where you can deconstruct the flip or the idea and then learn from that, like in a tutorial, like in a swing, like the hinge, the pull, the hip extension. So, and you're breaking this into pieces. And now that you're explaining this idea with the pulley or just with cables, makes a lot of sense. So I think you're really the flow world, or you guys are dabbling with some fantastic new ideas. So my question would be, where do you see benefits in a straight comparison, for example, to what we usually do with a kettlebell? We usually do swings, we usually do presses, squats and stuff. And I mean, just the momentum and just the ballistics in general is the USP of a kettlebell. The ballistics make it just unique. The biggest difference if we compare it to other training modalities. So where would you see this unique benefit of juggling or flows the way you do it. And you mentioned something with hand-eye coordination which was a big thing for you. So where do you place flows and juggling in that perspective?
Ooh, I love this. Because I have a science background. I want to talk about fascia, which I'm going to get into a little bit.
Do it.
And then I'm going to talk about just as a business owner. So just to be frank, I closed my gym about 3.5 months ago, just due to some new thoughts, ready for something different. And just based off the situation of where life put me. And I was like, you know what? I think this is where I want to start. I'm in the middle of my new journey as just a crazy trainer and how I'm growing with that. But I will say, as an entrepreneur and as someone who didn't know shit about running a business and I was never organized. You know, the person in class that had a planner and wrote their stuff in the planner. I was the one whose planner was shoved in their book back day one, and you never saw it again. So from an organized,
never saw the light of day.
Nope. I was never really organized in that sense. And my focus would bounce from thing to thing. So I had a tough time staying engaged and present into anything. And so I started to notice, especially once I dove into the kettlebell at that time when I didn't have a home and I was just looking for positivity, I started to notice, one, how much more confident I was. Just like being able to catch a kettlebell and knowing that thought in my head of like, yeah, I can do this. I can do that cool thing. And I think it's cool. And that makes me feel cool. Yeah, so just like that alone. Then it came down to, okay, I'm connecting now a 6-part flow, right? I'm doing a lateral clean, and then I'm flipping it during the actual clean instead of cleaning it. And then I'm catching it with my opposite hand and pulling myself into a lunge, dropping it to a kneeling windmill. So I started to realize like, man, my brain is starting to memorize not only kettlebell flows, my brain is starting to memorize conversations I'm having finally. My brain is starting to really focus on my numbers in a different light. And it's not that I sat and studied for hours about business, or I sat to study more about how to converse and dialogue and be a better business owner. I just started to do that naturally based off how much more engaged I became with the kettlebell, how much more focused, aware I became with the kettlebell. And I really think it brought a new creative outlet to my life that I'd been missing for a long time. I wasn't really into drawing, was never really into writing poems. But man, creating complexes, flows was an outlet, and it still is a huge outlet for me that fires new ways of thinking. And I started to just have new thoughts come up. And yes, we have influence from social media subconsciously, but I do believe in the power of fascia. Fascia holds on to emotion. It can hold on to memories. Why not? It can remember patterns that have happened. It's felt it before. So like I started to change and morph as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, based off the amount of kettlebell flow I had been doing. Because I didn't do anything strict yet until probably 2 years, a year and a half, maybe 2 years in to touching a kettlebell. So that gave me a very fresh entrepreneurship lens on everything. And knowing that, like, man, how do I solve this problem when I don't catch it here? I have to keep going again, and I can tweak it again and again and again until I find that flip. It's like when you flip it behind your back and you catch it behind your back. It takes forever maybe to get that movement down, but once you do, and you felt the sensation of a proper sling, which I'm going to get into in a second about like the fascia gets pulled down. Imagine someone just kind of pulls your arm to the side and it stretches you out. It feels kind of good, right? So we call that like a sling or a sling of fascia. When it gets stretched out and comes back in, lengthened to the maximum capacity, that is a nice stretched feeling of fascia. I used to love that about the cables. The cables would pull me and I would relax my grip and it would stretch my chest and my bicep tendon, little things like that. So those same nuances happen with kettlebell juggling. I know the videos only for people who are watching the videos, but if I was to even do like a lateral movement right here, if I allow the kettlebell to really pull me fully, it will stretch out my bicep tendon. It'll stretch out a little bit of my scap while I stretch out a little bit of my hip, you know, and I realized like, man, I'm getting a nice stretch doing some of these movements. The more I relax. Same thing when you juggle, when you catch it in a very specific way. If you, like, I would catch this one to this behind me and it would pull my shoulder down, but it felt good. It's like someone dropped my trap muscle. It's kind of like when you just hold the kettlebell here, you know, you let it just chill and open you up. But now the momentum is kind of giving me a mini chiropractor adjustment.
So, man, here we can hear this physiotherapy approach that you had kind of morph into existence now. with these,
I started to find more benefits as I got more comfortable with the movements and I stopped flexing everything. And that's why like calling is one of the best freestyle, whatever you're gonna call him. I love myself too. I like to put myself up there, but it does come down to and if you know his background, was an incredible dancer.
He didn't say this. He didn't say this on the podcast.
I got to spend some good time with Colin.
Man, I had him on a podcast, but he didn't mention this.
And so why can't he be so already groovy? He already knew how to do this. How to have spinal rotation. I had no idea what that was. The kettlebell unleashes my dance moves.
Oh, awesome, man. But you know what? I mean, I told Colin, I said, you know what you're bringing? You bring hip hop into the juggling atmosphere. And I mean, based upon your culture, based upon your upbringing, based upon your background, it is natural that you gravitate towards it. And that's this huge difference that you see when you take a look at Svetlana Oksikifor, the Russian juggler.
Name, but I got you.
All right. I don't even know if her name is Svetlana, but Oksikifor. I remembered it, but now it's escaping me. If you see how they do it with these strict and construed lines, where Svetlana Daniliuk, actually, she's also a kettlebell coach. She's a juggling judge. And she told me you have to hit these certain moves in a way in order to get points. And when you look at Colin and how you and others are now opening up the space, which freestyle juggling is probably the best description for this. It is just, you see, there's a different culture bringing different ideas into the world of kettlebell juggling, which is so fascinating to see. And man, I get that point with the additional, let's say, like therapeutic effect that juggling can have. And I mean, it's fascinating to listen to where you're coming from. And since you're mentioning fascia, I'm just almost through reading Michael Myers, right? Michael Myers' book of Anatomy Trains, which he says some great stuff in that book. And one thing that really comes to mind is he says there is the imposed and the exposed way of coaching. I translated it like this into the way we do it. And the imposed way is telling you how to move. And the exposed way is telling you where your weaknesses are. Then we got to work from there. And then we let you naturally move. And I think that's what freestyle juggling, the way you do it now, is exactly the exposed way of taking an art form from kettlebells, which is juggling. And funny thing, and that's what we have to acknowledge this. See, sometimes I have thousands of thoughts coming into my mind as well. But we have to acknowledge this. Even if maybe sometimes people look at kettlebell juggling, especially in the kettlebell world, you know how tribal things can get, right? And how people look at kettlebell juggling and think, well, that's just they're playing around with kettlebells. It's not something that is where a kettlebell is coming from or is dedicated to move with. But funny thing is, if you go down to the history, you see that the first thing that people were doing with these market weights is feats of strength with juggling, power juggling, right? Yep. So this is where kettlebells actually come from. So you guys are taking it back to where it all started. And creating new ideas out of it. Fascinating.
100%, man. And it's, as you talked about, like power juggling, you know how scary it is to think that some human can launch. I can't remember that guy that was famous for like putting the weight around his neck, and he's all over the Kettlebell Kings page with power juggling. Like he's doing like an 86.
Valentin Dikul. I think Valentin
Can you
Dikul.
imagine getting an uppercut from that guy? Can you imagine?
Oh man,
him punching you with how much he can already do with that kettlebell, how much he can already
and you know what? You know,
and
now
how about him receiving the punch?
Yeah.
You can probably take a hit. It gets a lot of weight coming at you fast.
Most definitely. And you know what now just comes to mind since you're mentioning Valentin Dikul? Another man comes to mind. His name is Johann Martin. And he has a gym in Hamburg, right? In the northern part. I think it's Hamburg, northern part of Germany, right? Fairly close to where I live. And he was one of the first. It's actually called the Johann Martin lift to flip two 32 kg kettlebells on the sides like a ski swing, and then up, and I think it's a double flip that he does with two 32s. And he was one of the original ones, an old school guy. I think he's over 70 years of age now.
Wow.
And now that you're mentioning this, it is fascinating to see when people, and there's even a woman who was famous for power juggling back in the history of kettlebells around the beginning of the 19th century. So juggling has definitely a place. And when I realized it, because I kind of looked at it like, it looks like play around. It's not what we usually do with kettlebells, right? I had this type of mindset to a certain extent, but when I learned about the history, I was like, boy, you have to open up, man. If it wasn't for juggling, probably our beloved lifts, the swing, the clean, the snatch, probably would have never got started.
Yeah, the play, man. You can't forget. And I'm diving as I just closed the gym down, and I'm re-exploring where I want to go in my life. Play is a big part of that right now. I'm just diving back into exploration with a mace and with a kettlebell and a landmine and a rope, and how do all these modalities feel? And even though I think I know so much, where am I missing links? Where can I create more? And I think play grows all relationships, not just with interpersonal ones, but your relationship with your training. So play for me is very vital. And then on the athletic standpoint of juggling, I want to bring this up because I think not enough people talk about it. One of my mentors and friends, David Wecks, he's the owner of the Bozu Ball, the inventor of the Bozu Ball. Very smart man, very fun guy. And he's obsessed with functional locomotion movement patterns. We talked about landmine training and how amazing that is. But then he goes, Jarrod, what you're doing is actually the next level. And I was like, you're right, because this is as close to as fighting as I could get, not a human. This is fighting also. If you think about kettlebell juggling, the way we're doing it, it's actually a lot of like very close patterns, and you got to stay real engaged with what's going on. That is high performance training. To be able to catch, release, know when to accelerate, when to decelerate, have tactical awareness, spatial awareness. That is, to me, one of the most fully integrated mind activities you can do, while at the same time moving your body. I think that fighting, like I said, like MMA is the top thing, because you can't read the other person in front of you. You have to problem solve on the go. Where kettlebell freestyle juggling, you technically know where the problems are going to be after you explore them, and you can but it's still as close as you can get, I think, to that problem solving energy of a fight.
Yeah, and it's like playing chess, right? It's what I'm realizing now that I'm upgrading my kettlebell juggling game to a certain extent is I'm realizing Colin's words, Darian's words, right? For those who only know him by his Instagram handle. And he said, go, man. Colin's a beast. And he, this really sticks with me. He said, I always think 2-3 moves in advance. So it's like playing chess. And I've realized this now that I've gotten the handle of a couple of moves, right? The behind the back flip, and just a couple of things which I consider advanced from my level where I am. And I remember his words and how they ring true. It's when you do one move, you immediately think, okay, so as soon as the bell comes up, I take one step forward. So then I bring it back, and then I have to catch it. But once I catch it, I want to go between the legs again, and then I want to go to the sides. And you have to compute the process in advance. And while I get what you're saying, that when you get good at it, this happens automatically, it's still your statement makes a lot of sense, because still the kettlebell is fairly uncontrollable, even if you are very good at it. I mean, it still happens to the best of you guys that the kettlebell drops, right? So, and maybe you pick up a slightly heavier weight, so it gives you a little bit of a challenge where you're like, okay, now I got to focus a little bit more. But man, your statement makes sense. Most definitely.
I see it as like a dance part thing, like, you know, salsa.
Yeah.
Like salsa, you're going to know the moves. Like you're going to know the salsa level 1. You're going to know the first 3 moves. Then you're going to learn level 2. You're going to learn the next 4 moves. Well, now let's add in, what if you throw somebody else in there and they are giving you a feeling that you need to adapt your movement to? The kettlebell's the same thing.
Amen.
Oh, I caught it here. I didn't know I was going to do that. Now I have to adapt somewhere else. Like the wolf flip that Colin does, I call it a wolf flip, coined it, it's his flip. So when you throw it in under your legs and it goes over your shoulders, right? One of my favorite flips to get. But when I saw it, I was like, this is science, bro. Like, because to me it was, because I tried a flip like that, right? Where you throw it here and you catch it with the other hand.
Exactly.
But if you were to, in my terms of what we use a lot of oblique and hip power coming up through that at the same time, right? Now I'm feeling all of my tension in my oblique, my hip, and my lat, which produces rotational power, which is obviously, to me, like as a scientist, it's obviously going to get the object further, faster, higher, all the things. But for him, like the way I thought about this, because I have accidental cool things I do where I did this one day and it landed here and I was like, sick. And now I can do that every time. Yeah. But I wasn't trying to do that move. I was trying something else, had an accident, felt good about the accident, was like, can I repeat that again? So I see him as like, when he got that flip, he was probably just doing this one between the legs that we had all doing and accidentally put too much power.
Boom!
It
flew over. Yeah.
And it might have felt good, where he had the sensation of like, oh, that felt good. But for me, it's like, it doesn't just feel good. That's a coil. Like to me, like that's a coiling movement pattern. So I saw a lot of like science when I would see that too. Like play, cool, but also like there's a science to it.
Fascinating. It's and funny thing that you showed this clean where the kettlebell landed in the nest with the bell resting on your elbow and then the handles over the top. The Chinese had this idea as well with the stone cleans, stone locks. Yep. So it's already an idea that has been dabbled around with, but these guys just pulled them up. And I love this. I tried this with the kettlebell as well, is where you pull the kettlebell up and then have it rest with the base on your forearm or part of your elbow, and you stick it up like this, which is also a cool move. So let's jump a little bit into coiling. And let me just preface this like this. I know David Weck. I know his methods. From watching his stuff. And some things I see merit, and in other things it is an experiment. I would coin it. I used to be a little bit more close-minded a couple of, let's say, like months ago. But after I had a great discussion with Dr. Michael Yessis, who was one of the greatest biomechanists who ever lived. He still lives. I think it was 92 years old, and I had a podcast with him. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah. And he shared.
I'm going to go back and listen to that.
Yeah, you got to check it out. Dr. Michael Yessis. And I ordered 4 books of this man, or 5, because I want his life work. And I want to dive deep into his work. And one thing that stuck with me was he said, you know what the problem is with many trainers is we are good at teaching the exercise, but we don't see the biomechanics behind it. And so in Soviet Russia back in the day, the reason why they were pumping out these beasts of athletes is because they combined the coach who knew the exercise with the biomechanist who knew the movement patterns that are required to do in the sport. So because they combined it, they were able to churn out these athletes and came up with very crazy, strange exercises, which I would call SSP2, specific specialized performance or preparation level 2 exercises, where if I look at it without an understanding of biomechanics, I would say, what kind of crap is this? But the biomechanics will tell you, well, we have to train the hip in that range of motion because that's exactly where this action takes place that the runner needs in order to get better. And then I asked him, I said, but don't you just become better by doing your sport? He said, well, maybe, but it's based on luck. I said, really? He said, yeah. Because if you want to become better at your sport, you have to have a biomechanist looking at your juking, or your dribbling, or your jumping, and then he's going to tell you this is what you're doing wrong based upon the biomechanical approach. I was like, really? He said, yeah. Otherwise, if you don't do this, you're in for luck. You might just be lucky that one guy is doing it very good. And since I'm reading his book, he's saying he never met in his whole lifetime a biomechanist or a professional when it comes to understanding movement patterns who said he met one athlete who did it perfectly from the get-go. Everybody's having flaws, but you have to have the biomechanist to understand where this flaw is. Now, the reason why I'm taking this huge approach is because of the question that I want to ask is, I think David Weck is experimenting with coiling, for example, but how much merit is there actually to it? Because you've been working with him, right? So you call him your mentor. So could you explain a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm blessed to have a few mentors in the last couple of years that really just, they felt my energy once they met me, and they knew that I'm not here to steal a product or your idea. I just want to share. If it feels good and it's the right thing to talk about, I should. And I'm happy to be someone that people in the industry can trust. Hopefully, I'm not just doing random shit all the time. There's some merit behind it. Coiling, I went to San Diego about 2 years ago, and I had an experience with David Weck, and at the time, Chris, can't get his last name right now, but Eroding Weakness, awesome guy also. He worked with David Weck for a while. And they showed me this concept of short side and long side, right? Like our body has a long side in this position. And if it's very long, to the longest it can go, another visual aspect, but if I'm as long as I can be here, to get longer, I got to get shorter on this side in order to get longer and more reach on my upper side. Does that make sense? Like right here is my long side up top, down here is my short side. It's short and contracted. Well, that's the same thing as rotational power for a dog or a cat moving through their spine. So coiling leads to more powerful rotation is kind of the big thing of what's going on with that. It also it connects you from the hip through your lat. So you start to just, like, if I was a fighter and I come from here, I'm going to have a lot more power than
that's my
control.
I immediately see Mike Tyson, right? It's peekaboo techniques, right?
Athletes, bro. If you watch these athletes, some of them were just talented and they were already doing it. That's what I was like when I was thinking about like Colin is an incredible, one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life, because I got to meet him and I am forever impacted by my experiences with him and influenced by his leadership abilities to really practice what he preaches. But at the same time, I look at his background, I'm like, dude, you were already dancing. You had talent, in that sense, like the talent was there. Now you got to do the reps to figure it out. If you have a biomechanic, hopefully it speeds up a process. So you don't have to spend as much time figuring it out. Someone will figure it out and share with you. Now you can adapt quicker. That's what having a coach is. But the short side, long side training, yeah, pretty much, it just produces way more rotational power. And then I got to learn about coiling deeper in Landmine University with a mentor and coach and friend of mine, Alex Canellis, who invented the system, Landmine University.
Landmine. I saw it. Yeah.
So the coiling core is involved in there too. And that's where I really started to experience a just different connection to my body. I started to feel my I'm going to show you another movement here, very visual, but I used to just do a lateral movement like that, but I didn't feel my obliques, my hips, and my lats back in the day. I used to feel my shoulder and my arm. And so I remember, after kettlebell juggling and playing for 2 years, like, as much as I was pretty functional in some ways, like my hips were pretty mobile, like I'm locked up. my shoulders, my scaps, like things are tight. And I'm walking around with sometimes pain, right? Some biceps tendonitis. And I'm just walking around and I'm getting through it. But once I learned about like coiling, I started to get really long in my lats again. I started to get really open. My hips, my psoas muscles started to stretch out. And I started to realize, like, for me, my right side was not good at shortening. Well, guess what? If my right side here isn't good at shortening my obliques and my hips in the front, which QL keeps getting sore from whatever I'm doing, from squatting or from swings? Why does my right QL get sore more? Because my right oblique and hip don't connect. But the coil and the methodologies behind that showed me that. It proved that. And I would say like 4 months after using the methodologies, I barely had any pain all of a sudden. Like my lats were open more. My arms felt longer. And I could feel that sensation, that weakness, because I practiced on my right side, that I tightened up that gap. And now the QL, I barely ever feel these sensations anymore. Not that I'm not perfect, but they've gotten so much better learning this new methodology and just being willing to unlearn some of the other things.
Interesting. To me, it sounds like it's an idea that has been around, but David is putting a term on it. Because when I look at, for example, a rack position in kettlebell sport, you have to bring your elbows close to the iliac crest of your hip. So you have to understand how to cower to a certain extent. So you go in this slightly kyphotic position of your T-spine, but the lower part, your legs are fully extended. So that's something that took me a lot of time. So locked knees, hips extended, glutes tight, elbows connect down, and then you get into the slightly kyphotic position. And when you shoot up into the jerk, you boom, open up.
More power.
More power. So I do see merits from that standpoint. At the same time, I've also experienced a similar situation with my tightness, and I got it loosened up just by snatching and jerking and pressing. And what I think, where I had a great conversation with Glenn from Kettlebell 6, he said, we must never forget how important the unilateral aspect of training is. And I mean, whether you pick up a landmine or a kettlebell, that's the great thing of unilateral training, which is not really taught at the conventional, I call it gym shenanigans, right? You sit at the chest press, you do this, you curl this. And even if you go a little bit more advanced, I mean, I love a good deadlift. I'm in love with the bench press forever. I think this is one of the greatest exercises you can do, especially if you want a nice chest.
I noticed.
I just love this. I love it. But what the barbell is not giving you is the unilateral training, except with the landmine idea. But with the typical training or the typical big lifts, deadlift, press, squat, you're always evened out. So Glenn told me he assumed that because of I was doing a lot of unilateral training after jumping into kettlebells. And before, I mean, I was deadlifting heavy, I was pressing heavy for my size, but I always felt some, not pain, but some tightness in my lower back. My left shoulder was always a little bit vulnerable to a certain extent. And after jumping into kettlebell training, this completely stopped and went away for good. So I think there's this beautiful idea of unilateral training that gives you so many benefits because it trains one side of the body which is also a scientific phenomenon, jumping into cross education, right? So you train with the left side, but your right side gets trained as well from a scientific standpoint, which is so fascinating to see. So this is where I see most definitely merit with David Wecks' ideas. And let me ask you one thing.
Except to go into David Wecks is like he's all locomotion. If it has to do with walking, running, sprinting, jumping, those exercises, he wants to find the patterns that are going to connect to anything like that. And all of those really apply to fighting, because fighting is one of the things that's blowing up in the industry even more.
Yeah.
So he's looking for more of those biomechanics, in my opinion, from locomotion to fighting.
Interesting. And see, that's why we have to stay open-minded at the same time. When I had this great conversation with Brad Jones, which he really opened up my perception of strong first, because I used to think that strong first is like, listen, that's how we do it, and you're on Soviet territory. That's how we do it, and I don't care, right? And their way is the only way. But the conversation with Brad Jones was so enlightening. He showed me a different side, and he said something which also stuck with me. He said, listen, we're open to ideas, we're listening, but that doesn't mean that we are a tissue in the wind. So we have firm ideas, we have them planted on earth, on the floor, but we also listen, and then we evaluate. So I think that's a tightrope that you're walking. It's not easy to do. On one side, you have your idea, your philosophy. On the other side, you're still open-minded. And so here comes this great question, which I think you are the perfect person to answer. Do you think, since you're coming from play, the idea of play, the idea of eye-hand coordination, the idea of coiling, the idea of juggling flows, is there a limit to it? Which one I want to be clear with this question that I want your answer from. Many times we see stuff on social that doesn't make sense initially, maybe make sense later. I get that. But we also have this need to create viral content. So the more explosive the stuff is that I post, and the more I go against the grain, the more clicks and views I get. So do you think there is a tightrope that we are walking? Is there a limit to it? Or should we stay open to everything and always go through every idea? And even the craziest thing that we see is like, yeah, let's try this. What are your thoughts on it? If I'm making sense with my question.
No, I hear you. I think my big thing is coming at everything from, why are you doing this? And asking the person, like, what is your reasoning? Is there reasoning? And finding that out between people. Because I think most people, myself included in the past, would just assume. Like, to be honest, Greg, like when I would see you in a rack position before I understood coiling, I was like, what? Why? Like, why are they all these fucking like, what is it? Olympic lifting of kettlebells.
Kettlebell sport.
Kettlebell sport, excuse
yeah.
me. But why are all these kettlebell sport people, they look ridiculous to me. Like, what is that? And I never attacked, I never asked anyone. But then I felt the feeling of coiling and what it feels like to have your hips fully extended and your legs fully locked out. And I was like, oh, like it makes total sense. Efficiency wise, it makes sense. And then energy output wise, it makes sense. But maybe it's not perfect for raw muscle mass, slow eccentrics, and all that.
Yeah, amen.
So I think it really does come down to always come in with a student mindset, like, hey, why are you doing that? Before even being like, that's dumb. Because I've discovered this year, like, is internal knee rotation bad? No, it's not. To do internal knee rotation is a part of our human body. It is meant to happen. The question is it on purpose? Do you train it? Why? So when I see people squatting like with duck feet, like maybe there is a reasoning. And sometimes we just don't know until we've explored the angles. This world is 3D. It's a three-dimensional world, right? Sagittal, frontal, transverse. There's so much to explore in those three planes. So until I explore, I never really come off as like, that's stupid. Although now I'm thinking about it, I did recently see like some dudes that are like, they're on a couch holding like a bed on one leg, like doing,
I think I saw that too.
I'm like,
yeah,
that's don't see the benefit on the highest performance. Like, you want to be a great performer, like, I still don't really see it.
Yeah,
but,
circus tricks.
Their why to me is probably like, I'm looking for likes. I'm looking for comments. I don't see many people.
I saw this one guy. He was I don't know. He was extended on a rope, and he was hanging really on a rope on a cross trainer doing something. And that's that circus tricks, right? That's what we can probably boil it down to. And funny thing is, now I also see a strongman, right? Man, his name escapes me. He's a bald dude with a mustache, tattooed Russian, Vlad. I think Vlad. I don't know, but he does crazy stuff.
Is it Victor Blood?
Yeah, Victor Blut. I almost
He follows me. Cool guy.
Oh,
Man.
awesome.
I was like, yes, he follows me. He's awesome.
see, that's where I see the like-minded people flocking together, right? Because when I saw Victor, I was like, the dude knows what he's doing. But from a standpoint, from somebody who doesn't know the tool and doesn't know where he comes from and doesn't know his philosophy. I mean, to me, he is a reincarnation of an original strongman from the 1920s. Yep. And he does stuff like this. But if you don't understand it, you probably think, oh, that's going to hurt. Yeah, it's probably going to hurt you. But this guy is built on a different level and is focused on a skill that really is a skill. But at the same time, and this is where I'm having sometimes a little bit of hard times with this. We're so in this information digital age, right? We're so bombarded with information that people need some kind of guardrails to a certain extent. And if coaches and trainers are always open to everything and new ideas, these guardrails extend to the utmost end of the earth, right? And then you have a beginner thinking he can pick up something that is probably dangerous or doesn't know what it's like to engage in a proper hinge. You see where I'm coming from? So this is where I sometimes believe certain guardrails have to be in place.
No, agreed. Having systems in place is important. I think for the masses, but when it comes down to somebody wanting to like chase a thing, I mean, it's your journey, and to do it on a smarter level, find a coach so you understand the systems. And then now that you know the rules, go ahead and try breaking them. What's outside of those rules. But learning rules is huge. Are you going to avoid inflammation long term? Are you going to avoid burn bridges long term because you actually like learn from somebody instead of going through the shit yourself? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I really do think it's the kind of personality type. Like for myself, for the last, that's going to be 30 years in January. For the most part, I've been like, I don't learn from other people. I go through my own shit eating, and then I come out learning so much more. But I'm starting to see the benefits of if I had a mentor or someone to communicate this, I would have saved my back pain a couple of years ago. I would have saved this friendship a couple of years ago if I had listened to another entrepreneur about their experience. So things like that, are important, but you have to have a mindset of growth and learning and vulnerability, to have the thought process of I could use a mentor, a coach, a friend, instead of I'm just going to go off the rails and see what happens when I throw this bell here and my back just tweaked.
Most definitely. Yeah. And we're still, I think we are the newer generation of kettlebell practitioners. And if you listen to the older ones, depending on who you listen to, but sometimes you get this kind of close-minded view, which I do understand to a certain extent. Because one thing that we can always say is, listen, if your idea works, prove it on the field. Have your track and field athlete kill everybody. Have your MMA fighter destroy everybody. Then your ideas are validated. And so that's where I also think, we need some proof, right? It's just because somebody shares this idea doesn't mean that it is something worth pursuing, but it's not, I wouldn't call it a strict science, even though, science is a way of knowing and learning things or reducing our level of uncertainty, which I heard somebody say.
We're in the science of feeling. Man. Like our science is feeling everything as much as we can like look at the angle, like, hey, what'd you feel there? How did that movement feel for you? Did it hurt your low back when you hinged?
And that's,
did you feel the hamstrings?
I
so we
always
are
say
in the industry of like, it is a science, but it is feeling. And so I will say, as someone who does throw out a bunch of here's modalities, here's ideas, here's thoughts, I don't know what's going to get somebody going. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what position's your favorite position, but if you try 20 of them, maybe you'll find a few that stick versus trying only 3 of them that were all system-based that maybe weren't your thing. So I do think there's value for different people. Like some people, like I said, I come from the background of I didn't write in the planner. I didn't have
I hear that.
Mindset.
I think that's where you're coming from. That's why you're so open to ideas. And where I'm from and the culture that I grew up in is more strict. We more like to have it. Okay, that's A, that's B, that's C, that's D, and not here's Z. Hey, look at this one. Right?
100%.
Which, and you mentioned this as well, which sometimes can turn into if we're too organized, we're too conservative, then we maybe miss new ideas which can move us forward. But if we're too progressive, too open, then maybe we develop the shiny object syndrome, where like, oh, wait, I spend 1 day with this thing and then 2 days with this thing, and then I jump around like a bee, right? But man, and that's why I think these conversations are so important, because we have to have great minds from the world of kettlebells come together, share ideas, and then help everybody, elevate, right?
Yep.
Understand how important the basics are, but also understand, I love how you said this. And I just recently said this in a video. If you have mastered the craft, then why not dive away from the ideal line? Because you've mastered it. Why not try some stuff out? And man, and juggling,
feel it for yourself. Feel it for yourself.
Feel it for yourself.
You think.
Amen. It is.
Because I can't tell you what feels good for you more than you can. As much as I want to tell you as a coach, like, that was good for your back. Well, coach, my back just hurt from that, but this one felt better. Fuck. Well, shit. Okay. Yeah. I will do this position next time. That sounds like a really good, and that sounds like you want to find the positions that work for everybody. Like in the world of missionary sex, like that's a safe, fun position. We know it's consistent. But like, have you flipped it around?
And it produces results.
It produces results. Have you tried new angles? Some other stuff feels good too.
And it produces results as well.
There, but so it does come down to like, I'm big on like, you got to feel things out yourself. Try new positions.
Amen. I like this.
See how it makes you get off. Because my big thing, especially working with clients, and we work with general population, I imagine on your end too. I work with a good amount of general population. The hardest thing is consistency. So if I find something that you actually like doing consistently,
keep going.
I win, and you're going to win, because at least you're going to get where you want to get to over time, which is what we were saying earlier. If you have a strict mindset, that's okay too. If you want to stick to your just swing, clean, push, pull, you're going to still move and progress. You just might not move as fast. Like, I look at myself as I'm pretty new in the kettlebell world the last 5 years. How am I already snatching insane weight? Well, I do have coiling in my body and in in that system of intention. I do have a different training modality background with ropes, like the ropes that I roll with the steel mace, feeling that go all over my body. So I know, maybe compared to someone who's been only practicing one way, how to loosen and flex in the right areas at the right time.
Oh, that's
compared
what's
to
up,
only
man.
being flexed, compared to only being flexed or only being loose into flex. Like, I'm like, man, there's more parts that can be integrated that maybe the other practitioner has never felt, because they haven't tried these modalities or these concepts yet.
Amen, man.
My deadlift got way stronger when I learned coiling, but it's not like I'm doing short side, long side training. I just now could feel, just like you could, your hips and obliques smarter, because they're more connected.
It's there's so much truth in there, especially with the feeling part. It's especially with the snatch, right? If the way I snatch, I like to call it a kind of a hybrid snatch, where I use both ideas. I'm not a huge fan. I got to put it like this. I like the idea of kettlebell sport, where you're always gearing into efficiency mode and letting the weight move you. But I also like the idea of strong first with proper tension, because as we know, proper tension builds maybe a little bit more muscle, gives you maybe a little bit more strength, right? So it's, I like this idea. So the first time you actually feel when you snatch a bell and you are leaning back, and you understand that if you're leaning back, as the kettlebell travels upwards, you're closing the distance between the kettlebell and your center of mass. You're now using your upper body as lever mechanics. And now a 16 kg is like nothing, because you move your whole body into the exercise. The first time you feel it, it's this aha moment. And it's so great that you're elaborating on this, how important it is for a trainer to let people do their thing and then say, hey, how did that feel? And I do it all the time when I have people do a swing for the first time. I always say, listen, don't worry about it. After I teach all the basics, I tell them, listen, your first swings are your worst swings. Doesn't matter. You just keep going. So they start moving. And then I'm like, okay, even most of the time, they are the worst swings ever. And they look like crap. But I say, don't stop. Don't be like, oh, no. You do 20. Even if it feels like bull crap. You keep going. So then they put the kettlebell down, and then I'm like, how did it feel? Well, my arms tense, my hips, blah, blah, blah. And based upon the response, how they feel, I know where to correct things. I mean, my eye is telling me as well, but sometimes they share important information for me to know so I can give some adjustments. And at the same time, they feeling their mistake, when they do it better, they immediately feel the difference. Yeah. And feeling is understanding. Just I had a conversation with Halbert from the Flowing Dutchman. He said this, man. Feeling is understanding, 100%.
Yep. And the communication as a coach, to be willing to be led by the person you're meeting through their feelings and their open communication and willingness to be vulnerable with you because you make them feel safe is a skill. That is the best coaches in the room. And I have a perverted mindset with this, but it's sex. If you don't like your leg in this position, tell me, so I'll move this way if it feels better for you. We can keep going. Now we can both have more fun. It's Amen. The same thing. All these partnerships. It's just so that training is a partnership. So I want to know how the person in front of me, what exactly did you feel? How did you feel? And if that's what I'm looking for too, awesome. If not, let's talk about it. Because I have to be, maybe my way wasn't the right way. Maybe there's coaching cue I could have given.
This is important. This is important for a trainer to understand that, okay, listen, normally this exercise gives 95% of people this type of sensation, but yours is different. How is that? Interesting. So then then they ask the question, why is that? And so many times I'm like, I don't know. Let's just keep going. Does it hurt? No. Well, let's keep moving. And I love how you say this, that we have to understand that being open to how the client feels, and this is the exposed way of coaching, of training and coaching. It's the empathetic, loving approach that is exposing the weaknesses to help you. And then as you get new information to attack these weaknesses, you move by yourself. And that's what I wanted to get out of Brad Jones from Strong First, because and he answered the question in the conversation, because my point was, we cannot walk around and say a swing has to look like this. Yes, we maybe see if a swing is bad, right? If somebody's leading with their hands only, if somebody is not doing proper hip extension, yes, these basic mistakes, yes. But people tend to gravitate in their own type of swing to a certain extent, and just let them be, because their body is dictating form. And just recently I thought about this. Form is not the same as skill. You can be skillful and your form still looks different than mine.
Yep. I love that. I haven't heard that. I love that.
I recently, because on the comments on YouTube, it's always like form. And I was like, yeah, but form might change. Listen, you have long arms. I have a short torso. I have a short shin. You have long quads or long femurs. My God, you look different, but we both have mastered the skill.
Yep.
That's what it is.
That's awesome. I love that you said that. I'm going to think about that for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to start studying everyone's techniques, and I'm going to start seeing it differently. I love
it is, right? It is a game changer. I was like, this is the big difference. It's not form, it's skill. And that's why I'm always saying perfect form is a myth, because you cannot pinpoint it down to a single experience based upon a body frame that looks completely different than yours. And I realized this, right? When I saw, for example, I'm a huge fan of Denis Vasilev, right? And he's a kettlebell sport, I think.
He's a kettlebell sport. I've seen
13-time champion. These guys are nuts. How they handle the 32 kgs. It's like, how are you guys even doing this? But as I'm thinking about this and as I'm watching him, I always thought like, well, my form looks different. My flexion of my knees or the extension of my knees looks completely different in the backswing than him. So I always tried to mimic him until I thought about what Steve Carter, my mentor, shared with me. He said, listen, it's always a good thing if you're looking for perfect form that you look at somebody who looks and is built similarly to you.
Mhm.
If I look at Denisov, for example, he's a heavyweight, right? He's a huge, tall guy. I cannot match his movement pattern, or at least not his form. I can match the movement pattern, but not the form, since he's completely differently built. And that really took the wool of my eyes. I was like, ooh, that's what it is. That's where it comes down to. And isn't it the same in juggling?
100%. 100%. Like me and Colin juggle differently, but I remember someone was telling me about it, and I go, I think I'm very flowy. I'm very like fluid, but I have a different background of mechanics, and my body, my arms are not as long. You know, like being around, I got to be around him. Like he's I think at least like 6 foot, 6'1", like that. But he also has very long arms that you're in front of.
Yeah, you see that. You see it really.
You see it on camera. You can see it on Instagram.
Yeah, you can see it on camera.
How much he has to do this compared to where, like how much he needs to twist his spine to reach this way compared to me.
Biomechanics,
it's very different. So my form, when I catch it over here, is going to look different because he doesn't need to reach as long with a longer arm and more mobility, also potentially in the back of the shoulder. I don't know the history. You know, so you look at all these things about length. And so I 100% go do the same thing in juggling because, yeah, we're all just built different. But we still master the same skill.
And that's what I see. Even with Beto Torero, the same thing. The way he moves, it just, you see the differences in the body structure, but the skill is the same on a similar level, and that's what we have to understand as trainers, right? It's the same skill, and it's fascinating, man. Hey, Jarrod, my man. Wow. It's we've been talking now 1.5 hours, and I really, really enjoyed this conversation. It's always great if we take it. And your emotional intelligence is very high. So that's why I think you're welcome. That's why I felt this conversation was less technical and more emotional, which I 100% enjoyed.
Back at you. Likewise. What you see in me is what you see in you. You won't be able to say that unless you see that in yourself. It's a beautiful thing.
Amen. And at the same time, don't you think at the same time, if we go into overdrive in a one-sided fashion, for example, if we go into overdrive with our emotional intelligence, we might miss some important cues from the more strict way of approaching things, for the more technical side of things. And that's why really the biomechanics, you have to Dr. Michael Yes's this conversation, because understanding the biomechanics behind something is a very dry thing to understand. It takes a lot of reading, takes a lot of joint angles, muscles, fascia, tendons, ligaments, what is happening. But at the same time, I think it makes you a better trainer if you understand, okay, this is exactly what's happening based upon this perspective. So I think, being open.
It gives you a knowing, and it gives and a knowing of why gives you consistency in what you're doing. Which is where I'm segmenting as a coach right now of like, what's next?
See, and let me ask you this: where are you going now? I mean, you've closed down the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening in your life? Are you taking clients?
So we're 3 months post the training spot. I had about like 50 members pretty consistently there.
Mm-hmm.
Just doing group training, one-on-one. And right now I literally turned my living room into a kettlebell landmine dojo. And so my one-on-one clients in person are all meeting me in my condojo, which isn't where I want to be forever. Because I do miss what you said about the soil, and the soil includes the people you're around. And if you have more people that are also passionate in what you're doing, it's infectious to the people's experience who are coming in. So right now I'm kind of just diving into what do I want more of, and what do I feel, where am I lacking, so I can start accelerating in that direction. So the last few months I went through, like, okay, financially I'm in a way better place. Okay, cool. But I'm not as on fire feeling. What's kind of missing right now in my life a bit more. Part of it is community, a big part of it, because I was running a facility that did Christmas events, Hanukkah events, New Year's together, go to
Mm-hmm.
beach days. So community is a big new piece that I currently am not as involved in. And then I'm also considering right now very seriously moving to Austin, Texas. I like a lot of people that are already there. There's a lot of like-mindedness energy. Like this right now, it feels like it's an everyday occurrence wherever you go there. Where I'm currently in Orlando, I don't have or experience that same tribal energy. So I think that Austin, Texas might be my next move. My relationship, my girlfriend's also there, so that would grow us in that aspect. But I think my career could really get juiced up from just a different environment and being a part of a team again. Because I do want to be a part of it. Before I was the owner, I was leading, but as a business operator, as a COO, not my skill set and not something I thrived in. And I just didn't grasp the full concepts of those systems, right? Of the techniques, the lines, the things that you need to make the thing keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was about 4 years of work in the training spot until I closed it down. But that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm really going back to an exploration mode of, okay, I was a trainer. I've been a group trainer. I've been a manager. I've been a gym owner. I've built a brand. Okay, what do I want to do now? More impact. How do I do that? I love coaching. Like I love when I teach Landmark University certifications. I love when I teach kettlebell flow clinics. Juggling, teaching kettlebell flow and juggling is one of my favorite things because the amount of smiling that you get is so infectious. The amount of just play, the kid energy comes into all these people. It just feels, it's just a beautiful environment to be in. So coaching in bigger groups would be great for other coaches, younger coaches, older coaches, inexperienced coaches. I'd like to do more of that and more traveling and meeting like-minded individuals like yourself. Even like today's podcast, I haven't done a podcast in such a long time, and it's invigorating me. Thank you so much for having me on it.
You're welcome, brother, man.
I'm vibing off of somebody else who shares an interest in what I share. And literally, as your background of what you said you're doing and what you've done, like has lived a similar path in some ways that I can truly connect on. So I want to be around that energy as much as possible, where when I had the gym, I was around that more, but I didn't have it like in the way I know I can if I dive in on the right people. And it might not be in the same city. And I've been here for 10 years, but it might be that time. So I think in the next like 3 to 6 months, I'm going to make a move and I'm going to officially know in the next month. And I want to build online more. I think we all do, right? More freedom, but I'd like to build more online so I don't have to service as much in person. I love it and I want to forever. I really do. At least a few people at a time. I always want to be seen. But I want to be able to travel and impact communities more because I love jumping into a community. I feel so natural at joining. I always feel at home wherever I go. I already meet the people. I connect. I know what it's like to just be a facilitator.
Amen.
But I don't want to have all the responsibilities of it like anybody else. I really enjoy being the animated character that enhances the space. I don't take the space from people. If you're throwing a party, like, cool, I'm going to invite people to the party that I think are going to enhance the party. And I'm going to brag to everyone about how cool you are also because you're the one that brought this whole thing together. I'm happy to like uplift and platform. As a human, I love doing that. I love having the gym space to platform other coaches and people. That's one of my favorite things. But now as a human being, I want to go back into how can I platform environments, communities that maybe need more juice. Like a place like On It is they're bringing themselves back on fire in a good way. But for a while, they were not as on fire. And like there's other gyms that go through these ups and downs, but I think the right facilities, the right community, they deserve to win. We just all need more help. And as someone who played the leader, I needed more help. I needed more people who wanted to go the extra mile to just be better.
I think, man, what you're saying resonates. It's two things. I mean, the online world gives you more freedom. That's what it truly does. I'm seeing this with YouTube and with the course system that we've built in the last 2 years. And it's really given me a chance. From the last couple of months, I could have closed down the gym and not do nothing because it requires a lot of work. It's funny. It's funny when people think, running an online business is like, man, and let me tell you, I hate these ads. I get mad when I see these ads. It's like, you know what? I wanted to make $1 million, but I don't want to work that hard. And I get off of these ads. I'm like, do you really think you can build a business that generates, doesn't matter what the amount is, but that is successful. And that doesn't, success requires work, my man. It's not something that just flows unless you sell your business for $1 million profit and then you go live on an island. Okay. But other than that, if you run the business, it takes time. So it's the online aspect, but at the same time, the community aspect, working with people, that's something that I never want to lose. And it sharpens your skill as a trainer. Working with people and the community vibe, just having the conversations, even everyday conversations after the training session, just having conversations with people, listening, learning from them, being open-minded. This is so incredibly valuable. And I think funny thing is what you're describing is what I'm having to a certain extent, and it's called a hybrid business, where you have a huge online component, but also a brick and mortar component. And since you're mentioning this, I mean, you're so passionate about this idea and about where you want to move. I think it would make sense that you are opening up your own space, maybe even in a more private setting to a certain extent. Yet at the same time, maybe you have to wear the business hat a little bit more, right? So to understand the business mechanics, because they might, from my perspective, they might be intimidating. But if you work with the right systems, I mean, I spend so much money on online system. It's when I look at the accountant, the numbers, I'm like, did I really spend so much money? But these are like coworkers. So we now live in a day and age where a lot of software can take a huge load off of your business responsibilities. So it's something that you might want to dive into, because whenever I have these great conversations with great coaches and like-minded people, I always tell them, man, you gotta do it, because in this space, it's so needed for people who are empathetic, loving, but also competent to make their mark and serve people. So Godspeed to you, man, moving forward. But you have no chance but to really, whether you move to Austin, Texas, or whether you stay in Orlando, man, you gotta move. Even when I look at Daring, right? When I look at Colin, I'm thinking Colin needs to do his own thing. If I was at his place, man, I mean, and I love where you're coming from, right? The community vibe, and I make your party look better, and I tell everybody how awesome you are, which is a beautiful thing to do. Yet in the business world, why was Pavel so successful? Because he came, he saw, and he conquered.
Yeah.
Right? He was like, Soviet territory, my man. And everybody believed him. Right? And since you have these great ideas, and since you are very passionate and competent, man, take your flag, put it down, and say, this is my space. Everybody can have the space. Well, I had a conversation with somebody that was funny. I don't know who it was, but we were talking, and I was like, in the kettlebell world, I believe there's a throne. The throne is up for the taking because I don't see the king yet. And I'm talking about our younger folks, not the older folks. I love Pavel. I love my sensei, Steve. I love everybody, but they are a little bit older. So they get into the vibes where I'm like, okay, now I'm relaxing, chilling a little bit. So we have to take the torch, right? So I see there's a throne. And then as I'm having this conversation with somebody, he told me, yeah, but we can still, we can still be friends, and we don't have to compete. And I'm like, brother, I'm competing with you 100%, but I still love you. but I am your competitor, my man. But hey, if I know somebody you can help, I'm gonna take, that's my brother right there. He can help you, or she can help you, but still I'm out for the throne. So is that something that the competitive spirit, I don't mean no harm to anybody, but I think the throne is up for the taking, and why not run for it? And if I see you, if I see Dan John, if I see Colin, if I see Pavel, if I see all these guys, I'm like, I got to up my game. And that's good, because who is going to profit from this the most? The customer, the client, right? We have to up our game.
The whole industry,
Amen.
Is better. So in the competition, it's interesting that you say that, in that competitive spirit, because I came from a very competitive background.
Aye.
But in the last few years, I've realized that the competitiveness in a healthy way leads to smarter collaboration long term.
Oh.
And I do personally, because you push each other to be better.
Amen.
So you are collaborating as much as you
Amen.
might be competing. You're collaborating naturally. And for me, I actually said this to like Weck, Alex, and maybe I mentioned this to Steve too. We had a couple good hangouts in person. And for me, the people who were on the throne, who built the path for the newer people, I call it in rap, I'm like the OGs.
Yeah. The OGs. That's what's
sit
up.
on the throne.
Amen.
They absolutely deserve to still eat, and they should be at the table.
Amen.
Now, there's multiple OGs in my head. There's not just one throne. There's like, when I think about it, like, okay, like Steve Cotter, what he was doing was bizarre during his time. So he has one of those thrones, right? And then we go to Pavel, okay, that's definitely on another throne. And you know more about the history of kettlebell users and athletes and coaches, but I see it as like there's 4 to 6 thrones per generation, whatever it is, because I'm not going to be the hard style only guy. You know, I'm not going to, I might want to be only the functional guy. I don't want to just be a juggler. Like, so I think there's multiple thrones in an aspect. I think that there's always more room at the table for more thrones because there's too many people on the planet to help. And if we look at the industry and we see, I don't know the stats anymore, Greg, but you know, if 15% of the planet is currently working out and 5% of those people who are working out have coaches, well, then we're already missing 10% of those 15% because we're over here trying to compete with each other. So like, let's just get more people in fitness. Because if we can get the other 85% of humans into fitness, if we have 80% of human beings getting into fitness, well, there's a lot of food on the table for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And that's,
so I really try to keep that spirit with the collaboration.
And you know what's funny? It's competition doesn't mean scarcity, right? So just because I have a competitive nature doesn't mean that I walk around with a scarcity mindset thinking that, ooh, there's not enough people on the planet to do my business. So it's fascinating to see from a business standpoint. Listen to what David Wecks said in an interview when he was coming up with the Bosa Ball. He said, I saw 2 things. The first thing I don't even remember because he said the second thing, money. And I was like, yeah, but it's the truth. He saw an idea and he also saw a way to capitalize on it. And as much as we want to help people and build a community, we also have to eat. And I love how you said this. Everybody deserves a chair on that table, but you have to make sure that you own that chair, that name is on that.
What's the value you're bringing to this dinner that we're all having together? It's kind of like a potluck. What are you bringing to the table? With us?
Amen. So if you want to sit with us, you have to bring value. We're all listening. And I think that's what the beautiful thing is about these conversations that I had when I with over 40 people on this podcast is everybody smells immediately if you're talking crap to a certain extent. It's not that we want to be negative in that regard, but you really have to bring value, knowledge, and skin to the table. And in order to deserve a seat at the table, you have to have a competitive mindset to a certain extent. And I love what you say because that just resonates with me as well. We collaborate if we are in a healthy competition. Small example. I saw Dan John upgrading his thumbnail game on YouTube. And I was like, my God. And look at how he's racking in the views. So I wrote him a comment. I said, you know what's awesome, Dan? I see 2 things. You upgraded your thumbnails and you're upgrading your quality, your production quality. That leads to 2 things. A, more people get to know that there's an actual expert who knows this stuff. And B, it pushes me to move forward. That's what it is.
100%.
That's collaboration. Man. Jarrod, hey. Man, I've enjoyed
absolute pleasure.
really enjoyed this conversation, brother, man. We all have a seat at the table. We're all contending for the crown. I love this, man. These different thrones, it's like the Game of Thrones, man. Awesome. So, hey, Jarrod, I really want to appreciate your time. I want to appreciate the insights, the value, and the experience you brought to this podcast, which I am 100% sure that it elevated and lifted some of the audience that is listening and or watching. And really, I truly appreciate it that you took your time to sit down with me in this podcast, man.
Thank you again so much for having me. Super grateful to share space with you, to have these kind of conversations, for you to ask those kind of questions, and to be able to share with somebody else who gives a fuck, who loves, and it is really here to level the planet up. You know, I don't know why else we're here. So it's really beautiful to have my thoughts come out and to share them. So thank you so much for holding the space for it.
So here's the next step that you have to do. Like the video, consider subscribing, share it with a friend who's also interested in kettlebells, and then go watch this playlist where you have all the powerful conversations that I have had with the greatest minds in the kettlebell world. If you enjoyed this podcast, you're going to enjoy these other ones as well. So go click on it and watch it right now.